You're listening to the Color Country Podcast, your passport to the breathtaking public lands and tourism destinations nestled in southern Utah and northern Arizona. Join host Stephanie DeGraw and her guests.
Hi, and welcome to the Color Country Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie DeGraw, and today we're with Fred Armstrong, who is the Stewardship Coordinator for Conserve Southwest Utah. We're very happy to have you here, Fred. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here with your listeners today. And on behalf of Conserve Southwest Utah, I'm pleased to give you an overview of volunteerism and how we can be good stewards of our area, as well as the other programs that Conserve Southwest Utah oversees.
Excellent. And let's go back before we get into it to kind of the beginning and talk about how this group came to be.
Sure. Conserve Southwest Utah started up as a citizens grassroots group of people in our local area, Hurricane, St. George, etc., that were concerned about what is happening to our area as things change, as more and more people move to the area, as more and more tourism brings its own unique stressors and stresses on our local environment. And they formed a group that was focused on protecting and being wise stewards of resources such as our water resources, our habitat for wildlife on public lands that we have around us, and also the concept of desert livability. How do we live as a growing human population and have a minimal impact and leave a minor footprint on this fragile desert community?
Yes, and I know a lot of people are concerned about that challenge that we're having, especially with our growth. And you actually help people do more than just worry. You help them to actually have boots on the ground, hands-on experience. And I'm real excited to hear about what are some of the things people can do to get involved.
The ways that people can get involved, actually a variety of ways through all of our programs. Let me just share with you in our water conservation program. Many of the listeners are familiar. This past year, we co-hosted our very first Parade of Gardens in southern Utah. It's kind of a spin-off of the Parade of Homes, where people that live here shouldn't be trying to plant things that are not native and don't thrive in our area. And so we worked with the Washington County Water Conservation District and others who are interested in native landscaping and having beautiful spaces around us. And so we had a showcase of homes where people could visit yards that were well adapted to the desert environment. And we will have a second Parade of Gardens this year, and hopefully it will continue on into the future. So one of our coordinators for that will be speaking to your listeners in the future with respect to how listeners can get involved in either having their homes as a showpiece for the Parade of Gardens, or people who just live here and want to get ideas to improve their own environment around their own homes. And so that is one way that people can get involved. Another way is that with our water conservation program, of course, is the Get Off Your Lazy Grass program that is also co-sponsored, well, largely sponsored by the Washington County Water Conservancy District, where people can reduce the amount of turf that has been planted and reduce the water consumption on that turf. They qualify for a rebate if they put in a water conserving landscape. And it doesn't have to be something as, shall we say, ugly as fill your yard with rock, the xeriscape. And this goes hand in hand with those ideas from the Parade of Gardens. Another way that people can get involved is with our Desert Livability program. We are hosting monthly meetings as a forum as to how residents can learn about ways that our area can grow, how cycling or hiking or walking trails can be improved in our area so that people can get around, be less dependent on their own personal vehicles, and again, live in harmony with the desert without contributing to greater and greater sprawl of infrastructure. But what I'm here to focus on today is our public lands program and stewardship. For many, many years, since 2006, when our organization first formed, there have been volunteers who have wanted to do something to make a difference in the whole scheme of things for conservation. Conservation, it's part of our name, Conserve Southwest Utah. And let me springboard off of that. You know, many people think that Conserve Southwest Utah is the Just Say No organization in our area where, you know, say no to using water, say no to additional growth, say no to bringing more people into the area. That is farther from the truth. The term conservation comes from to use or to caretake wisely. You know, not to use it all up until it's all gone, but to use it wisely, to allow things like water and our natural environments to be able to replenish themselves so that they are not lost forever. So with respect to our conservation projects throughout the years, largely they have been things like, oh, let's have a trailhead litter cleanup at various locations throughout our area. That's gratifying, but as everybody knows, litter continues to come back.
Right.
And we don't want to be just the litter control police, but we actually expanded into kind of like the friends group of our Bureau of Land Management field office, to where our volunteers became more and more involved in projects of exotic species removal, such as tumbleweeds, Sahara mustard, things that proliferate on the landscape that, once again, are not native here, but they do very well in a dry and arid environment, and they crowd out the native species that should be here.
So could I interject there? So with the local landscape restoration project, would that be one of the examples you're talking about?
It is. We have worked several years with the Bureau of Land Management on the Red Cliffs Desert Reserve to not only remove some of those exotic species, but also to have our volunteers be our auxiliary workforce to be able to help them plant small nursery-grown native plants. We stake poultry wire cages for protection so that these very palatable, succulent little new plants are not immediately eaten by the native wildlife in the area so that they can grow and develop seed and expand. One of the recent projects that our group has worked on has been a restoration project on a fire scar on the Beaver Dam Wash National Conservation Area. That is the area that's immediately over the mountain to the west of St. George. There was a fire that was started by a left-behind campfire that burned several acres, and it actually killed hundreds of mature Joshua trees that were actually a portion of the Joshua Tree National Natural Landmark. And these trees were in the range of probably 120 to 250 years old. And in the last 20 years, there's been very, very little natural regeneration. And so in concert with the Bureau of Land Management, who manages that conservation area, we have been planting nursery-grown Joshua trees to try and create little islands that will produce seed and be able to scatter that seed as they mature farther and farther and hopefully restore these areas. It's not something that's going to happen in our lifetime. This is definitely a pay-it-forward project. None of us are going to see a mature Joshua tree forest back on that fire scar, but maybe our grandchildren children or great-grandchildren will have that experience. And that's largely what conservation and the forward thinking is all about.
Oh, definitely. We do want to have our children and our children's children be able to still enjoy this beautiful area and these things that actually draw all the people here. But as you say, we need to work in a way to make it so we're not affecting the land to the point where we've ruined it, so to speak, if I may be so blunt. And Fred, tell me about one of your exciting programs that you actually got a grant for.
Well, a couple of years ago, the board of directors for Conserve Southwest Utah had the vision to expand our stewardship program to go beyond just doing litter cleanups or pulling tumbleweeds and bagging them and getting them off of the landscape. And they had the opportunity to apply for a grant through the Bureau of Land Management to do some desert tortoise monitoring in an area where data has not been collected for decades. And our organization applied for the grant, was successfully awarded, and then it turned into a, oh my goodness moment. We received the grant, but we currently don't have anybody on staff who has the qualifications to actually carry out the project itself. And that's where I came on board. They recruited for a manager for this project and looking for someone with the background and qualifications. And I was recently retired and looking for meaningful things to do. And I applied and they selected me. And so for the last 2 years, I have been leading a core group of about 20 volunteers who have been assisting us with placing wildlife cameras out in the field. We've been doing field surveys, looking for signs of desert tortoise burrows. And then, of course, once we have these remote cameras placed, you have to service them periodically. Go out, change the batteries, collect the data cards, and then review the literally hundreds of thousands of images that we've collected to see what's going on in the life of desert tortoises, kit foxes, badgers, bobcats, spotted skunks, a variety of reptiles, and a whole suite of birds that use what many people would otherwise think, wow, there's nothing that lives out here.
Right.
So it's been a very exciting project, and we've supplied the Bureau of Land Management much needed data for them to make decisions on future appropriate uses of that national conservation area.
And that's what's so interesting is most of us don't think there's anything out there except the beautiful red rock. And it turns out there's a whole bunch of wildlife. So I'm excited you brought that up. And has there been anything that's been unexpected in your journey with all of this that you're doing?
Well, one thing that is unexpected, and even though it was predicted, we actually supplied the Bureau of Land Management with the first photo documentation of speckled rattlesnake living on BLM lands in this corner of Utah. It is a Mojave Desert species. It's, as I mentioned, expected to be in these habitats. People have stated that they have seen them as they have hiked around in these vast expanses of desert, but no one has ever actually documented one. And our monitoring cameras actually, on several occasions, documented speckled rattlesnake at a few of these desert tortoise burrows. And so that was exciting for us, as well as for the local BLM office, as well as for the state office. They were rather excited to know that we actually have photo documentation of this species. The other thing that was unexpected and equally interesting is that it's no secret or no surprise that desert tortoises are kind of like the home builders for wildlife in southern Utah. They will dig a burrow, whether it be a burrow that they plan to use for long-term purpose, or maybe it's a burrow that they just use to where they can shelter and get out of the sun during the extreme portions of the summer. But other animals rely on those burrows as well. And the last 2 years, we have observed tortoises and kit foxes cohabitating in, I shall say, a small condominium complex of desert tortoise burrows.
That's amazing.
And we even have photos where the kit foxes will come out of the burrow, the desert tortoise will come home from, let's say, a morning feeding, and they will plant themselves in the entrance of the burrow so that the kit fox cannot return to get back in the burrow. It's a very interesting relationship that we continue to document at this location, because normally a full-grown adult and wily kit fox would actually be a predator on desert tortoises. And so it is a great surprise to us that these kit foxes have not decided to get a purchase on a soft body part like a leg or a neck or something of one of these tortoises.
They're actually coexisting.
And yes. So it will be interesting this spring while we have the monitoring cameras running to see when the tortoises and kit foxes start to interact again. The kit foxes have been going in and out of the burrow all winter long. The tortoises are probably tucked away in some corner of the burrow chambers, and they're probably saying, when are these guys going to go to sleep? I'm tired of all this traffic going in and out of the house.
Get off my lawn.
Right.
I would have never imagined a kit fox and a desert tortoise to be cohabitants, like they're sharing a condo almost. So let's look ahead for some of your future plans.
Well, right now, we have submitted a letter of intent for another grant that will deal with monitoring pollinators, bees, and butterflies. And once again, many of us are familiar with the fires in 2020 that burned many acres on the Red Cliffs Desert Reserve. And a lot of the plants that these pollinator species depend on, they are not coming back in a robust fashion. And so Conserve Southwest Utah is applying to be able to both monitor the status of pollinators as well as be able to grow out and restore some of the plants that these pollinators rely on. Some of the things like desert marigold or scarlet globe mallow, brittle bush, things that supply nectar sources as well as pollen sources for these insects.
And it's amazing to me how this is all so interrelated that oftentimes we don't think about what is going on out there from a wildlife standpoint, from a standpoint of our vegetation. And it's so great to hear that your group is helping both of those things be stronger out there in our desert. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, the main thing I'd like to add is my and Conserve Southwest Utah's deep, deep appreciation for these dozens of volunteers who give their time. We have been out there toiling, digging holes in the desert. We have been out there hiking up canyons and mountains in the heat of the summer and the wind and the cold in the winter to keep these monitoring programs going. And believe me, we could not do it without the membership that we have and the volunteers, and even for the people who can't physically volunteer and go out in the field. We are so grateful for the donations and contributions to our nonprofit organization, because that helps fund these supplies and materials that we need to assist in these projects.
And I appreciate you letting us know, too, how fragile it is out there in our deserts and some of the challenges that it faces. And how can people volunteer as far as, do they go on a website or how can they get a hold of you guys?
The best way to stay in touch and to find out what's coming up with Conserve Southwest Utah is to visit our website. It's conserveswu.org, and you can click on the events button and it will bring you to a calendar of the upcoming scheduled events, whether they be volunteer field opportunities or whether they be some of our sponsored speakers that we bring into the area periodically. So it's just best to periodically stay in touch with that. And you can also contact any of us through that website via our email addresses. I maintain a running list of people who are just interested in volunteering, as well as people who have been volunteering regularly. And so as soon as I have projects on tap for needing some manpower out in the field, I send email directly to those volunteer groups. So they're the first to know, and they're alerted without having to constantly check back to the website.
Right. And I believe there's a way you can sign up for a newsletter on the website as well.
Yes. We have a newsletter that comes out monthly. It's not on any set day of the month. It all depends on what things we're needing to get out in front of people, but it does come out roughly on a monthly basis, and it will be delivered directly to your email. And if it gets to be too much for you, there's always that unsubscribe button.
True. Well, I'm subscribed, and it really helps me keep track of what's going on in our area with our public lands. So I appreciate that. And Fred, I really appreciate your time here on the Color Country podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie DeGraw.
You've been listening to the Color Country podcast. Enjoy your public lands and remember to leave no trace.